Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. This week we're going to talk about later in life and just the phrase itself, because it's come to my attention that some definition needs to be made on what that means and how that's used. So I've been on TikTok and there's a lot of commotion happening in comment sections. And in general, it's on women in their mid-20s realized that they were gay, and women who realized in their 30s and 40s come on their comments and say,
"Oh, that's not later in life.
I realized so much later.
I already had these things established."
And honestly, it kind of gives my pain is worse than your pain. We don't need that. In this community, there's enough drama out there. We don't need it inside. So the piece that I want to talk to you about is, what does later in life actually mean, and what's the unifying experience no matter what age it is that you come out. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know that I generally don't love the term later in life, but I don't like it because the word late is in there. And when we say later in life, it gives the impression that this person is late to the party, or this person is too late to do certain things. And that's not true. And I really hate the idea that we're sort of spreading that is true. But what I do love about the concept is the designation as far as like later in life, the part of it. If I were to define later in life, I would say after your initial understanding of sex and sexuality and sexual interaction and or romantic interaction with someone else. So really, it doesn't matter if you're 18, if you're 25, if you're 38, or if you're 49. It doesn't matter when in your life it is happening. It just means that you've gone through a period of your life where you've understood yourself to be one way, and you fully live into that one way that is like age appropriate and probably what your peers are doing. And then once you've established yourself in that way, you realize your way to be different. Okay. So I'm not talking about the teenager who, as they're realizing they have romantic feelings for other people, they realize that they have romantic feelings for those who are the same gender, and therefore they're coming out as someone who likes the same gender. I'm talking about specifically women who start dating men and date men for a while, have intense, deep relationships with men, maybe sleep with men, and then realize that men or just men are not necessarily what they're attracted to. That understanding, once you've already established yourself with your peers and with your family as a straight person, when that understanding shifts, it is a different type of interaction than when you are first learning about it in, say, your teens. And I wouldn't even say this is harder or easier either, because the fact is, anyone who's living in a situation where who they're going to be or who they are is assumed, when you have to correct that, it is hard. When you have to explain to someone that you do not fit the mold they have put out for you, that's a difficult thing. And in reality, difficulty is measured by what you've done in your life. It's not measured by what other people have done in their lives. So the most difficult thing in your life might be objectively putting two things together, not as hard as what someone else has gone through. That doesn't make what you're going through not hard. And that doesn't make it appropriate for other people who've also gone through the same thing to come back at you when you're going through it and say, no, it's not as bad as what I had. Especially when the original poster is not saying things like, oh, it's so much harder in my 20s than it would be in my 40s, or I wish I was in my 40s, or I wish I was in my teens. They're just saying, this time, this is what I'm unpacking. Well, I said unpacking again. This time, this is what I'm dealing with, and it's hard. The reason the later in life phrase is so controversial for people is because when someone claims that phrase, they are putting themselves in a category that is actually different from a lot of other queer people. When you're understanding who you are outside of the lens who you have presented yourself as for so many years, you're going through something like a second adolescence, which is when you're kind of for the first time feeling these emotions. Once you start dating or start being attracted to people and being open about that attraction, you feel all of a sudden like you're 12, 13, 14, 15 again. And you're doing it in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. That piece is what makes later in life hard. Because other people who did come out in their teens have already done that, like that super intense drama-filled relationship. People who come out later, who understand this about themselves later, do that for the first time. If we're saying women, specifically with guys, they do that for the first time and have those dramatic relationships and those fights and dreams and all those heteronormative things that teen girls have. And then they grow up and get mature, and then they have it again when they've had the realization that they want to date women. And at the same time, the women they're dating often have already done these things. They've already had their awakening and their understanding, and they are already more established in their queer identity. And that can be hard. Okay, let's take a moment and talk about this. When someone who's coming out later in life, when someone who's just sort of understanding who they are, when they date an already established queer person, there is a dynamic in that relationship that feels like an unequal balance of power. And I'm not saying that every relationship is all about a power dynamic. In fact, I would say that the healthier relationships are not about power dynamics. But for the person who is just understanding who they are, there can be a learning curve. And that learning curve can't not manifest itself in your relationship, because you're in your relationship, right? And you're vulnerable and emotional and I don't know, maybe needy, maybe excited, maybe interested in certain things and wondering about things and still dragging that heteronormative understanding of yourself and sex with you. That's a lot, especially for someone who's already done that, to walk you through again. Then for our later in life family, they feel like they're kind of out in the cold. They assume that those established in the community are not going to want to date them. They don't want to date other people who are just figuring out who they are, because that heteronormativity is strong and intense and honestly kind of grief-inducing, because they're working through what they feel like they've missed out on, or they're working through the ways that life has not been safe for them prior to that. I've heard from numerous women their realization of what their bodies did and how they felt, what they assumed about themselves when having sex with men, and the way that changed, their understanding of that changed when they realized that they're queer and start having sex with women. That can really rock your world for a while. That cognitive dissonance of what you've always assumed it was going to be versus what it is when you're living your truest life is very different. And holding both of those in your brain is hard. Undoing the years of heteronormativity and those years of compulsory heterosexuality and allowing yourself the freedom to get into this new relationship, or even just to carry this new title for yourself, letting go of those is really, really hard. And the thing that I can't stand to see, and I'm seeing it, I feel like so much more lately, is people who are also going through that at a different stage of their life, telling people who are going through it earlier that it's not as hard. I have many videos on what it feels like to have to leave your family, and if you realize your sexual identity and you end up getting a divorce and you have kids. And I have those videos out there. They're on playlists. Please check them out. But the video I really want to draw your attention to is the one that I did about a month ago about coming out later in life and grief. Because that grief feeling is really a unifying emotion for this population of the queer community. That feeling like you've lost something, you've lost parts of your identity that you always assumed were yours, feeling that you're going to lose friends, because honestly, you probably are going to lose some people in your life if you come out like later and you come out after you've already established yourself. Because just like if you get divorced, you typically lose some of your friends, right? Someone does. There are going to be people in your life that aren't going to get it. There's going to be people in your life that are going to say,
how did you not know this about yourself before?
And when they say those things, what are you going to say to them? You know, you just didn't know. And in reality, you don't have to answer any of them. And I would encourage you to really decide who you actually feel like explaining yourself to and who you don't, because you don't know anybody answers. But you also don't know answers to those older than you who are just coming out and understanding themselves. This feeling that people who aren't going through our exact situation are not having it as bad as we are is not a new emotion, but its prevalence is so much bigger with the onset of so much social media consumption. Algorithms give us our own echo chamber, right? And they give us our understandings of ourselves informed by other people's understandings that match ours. We like videos that sound like things that we feel. We rewatch and share things that resonate with us. But the algorithm doesn't see a difference in a 20-something later in life coming out and a 40-something later in life coming out. So you throw those populations together and it doesn't always go super well, because that that understanding of each other and that support for each other and that, oh, wow, I feel that too. And I can understand that too is blocked by this understanding of being in your 40s or 50s or 60s and looking at someone in their 20s and thinking, wow, I have years that I'll never get back that you can still live now. And that grief is real and it's important to feel it. It's important to name it and to process it. But what I challenge you to not do is then put those expectations and understandings and labels on other people that have already been put on you. When you feel pressured to give answers because you came out later, because you're already married, or because, you're breaking up the marriage or breaking up a family or upsetting your parents, I don't know. When you're given those messages, you're given those messages as keep your truth quiet, keep your truth hidden, do not make other people uncomfortable. And in fact, that's probably the message that made you keep it under wraps to yourself and or others for so long. Why would you visit that on someone else then? Why would you show up in the comment section of someone in their 20s or early 30s who are understanding themselves differently now and say, don't talk about this because your pain is not as bad as mine? Why would you say, keep it to yourself and keep it quiet and deal with it yourself because I don't want to see it? Because that's exactly what was done to you. Later in life, earlier in life, when you have to explain to people who you are, that automatically others you. That automatically puts you on this outside, nose pressed to the glass, wish I could be like everybody else place. So what would happen if all of us on the outside with our nose pressed to the glass looked at each other instead? What would happen if we supported each other and understood that each of our journeys are our own journeys and we cheered one another on without making it about us? So instead of, girl, you've got all this time to live, you're still in the beginning of your life, look at me, I'm in my 40s and just figuring it out. Maybe instead you say, I feel you. I hear the loneliness. I hear the frustration. I hear the grief. I hear what you mean when you say, I was unsafe in my relationships with men. What if we did that instead? I don't know, just a thought. That's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other.